Chapter 8. May 1943. Sterling had known the moment he saw her step off the boat at Augusta because she was a woman who moved as if the world was hers alone, but, equally, that she had no permanent place in it. Her demeanor was one of poisoned grace, as if none of the world's travails had impacted, nor would impact on her. What she was hungry for information, which, of course, made her a spy, but also made her apart from others, distant. She could not be intimate. Oh yes, she could make love, but that was not intimacy, that was expedience. That measure of gratification made her dangerous. General de Gaulle himself was the phrase she most commonly used. It was said that she crossed lines that no one else could cross. These lines, however, often consisted of something else: names, missing reports, operations that had gone catastrophically wrong, whole battalions of troops gone off to action and never heard of again, people being wiped off the face of the earth. David trusted her. That hurt more than Bill liked to admit. His younger brother had always believed that love could overturn a wrong, that no matter how sorry they were for something, as long as they showed it, it was all right. Josephine was not sorry for the British lives lost in Ireland, so, by his brother's logic, she should have hanged at 17. However contrite Eve Mansour was, there was too much of a body count for it to be a coincidence, or no bodies at all, or charred skeletal remains, so the reports from the southwestern border told. Natsweiler. Now Mansour was here, in Sicily, close to the SAS, close to Maine, smiling as if the past were up for negotiation. Bill watched her carefully from the dock, said nothing, did nothing. That was his advantage. Eve thought she was choosing sides again. But there was only one side for her, and that was Algeria, free of the ruling French. Proof he had was poor, but Bill didn't need anything more than instinct to piece together the trail of the wretched men and women who weren't ever coming back. If it were up to him, she would be in Pentonville immediately. But it wasn't up to him. However, Bill Sterling could do what he could to ensure the blood in her hands was evident for all to see. He looked down at the letter he had just written. It wasn't going by service post, and certainly not by telegraph. Churchill was returning to London and, by God, that man owed Bill a favor. He looked over the envelope again, imagining the words he had written. Bill was convinced Clark felt like him, and now was the right time to act, before Mansour could do permanent damage. 2. Dudley Rangel Clark from Lieutenant Col. Bill Sterling. Date, October 1943. Subject, the Algerian asset, Eve Dudley. The situation at Termoli has confirmed our worst suspicions. The commando order from Berlin is real. Hitler is no longer distinguishing between soldiers and saboteurs. If my brother's unit or my own men are taken, they are dead men. I've ordered the men back into uniform to force the hand of the Geneva Convention, though getting Paddy to salute is still a lost cause. Regarding Eve Mansour, she is currently with us. She slipped through our checkpoints with a consignment of flamethrowers for Paddy, an act of bravery that likely saved the town from the panzers, but we both know the currency she's really trading in. She is effectively playing the unstoppable partisan to mask her true objective. We have verified the breach. She has betrayed the SO and the French resistance cells to the Abe. Get Dalton to investigate with all priority his nodes in the Alsace, Normandy and Nancy regions. Her logic is as cold as the desert at night. Algerian independence purchased with Nazi coin. She views the liberation of Europe as a mere distraction from her own nationalist goals. Paddy is smitten and defiant, welcoming her to the front with a "fuck you to my standing orders." I am keeping her in place for now. It is safer to have her where I can watch her than to let her vanish back to Bagnara or Algiers. She thinks she's a partner in our defense. In reality, she is a bird in a cage she hasn't noticed yet. We will feed her the strategy we want Berlin to hear. Let her keep her machine gun for now. The more she fights for us, the more the Germans will doubt her when we finally pull the rug out. Monitor the Algiers frequency. If she makes a move to exit, I'll handle it. Bill. 88,888,888. May 1943. It was decided before the move to the officers, where the two of them sculling would be open to question. Josephine used the ledger to greatest effect. The power dynamic had shifted. She was no longer the interrogator and Sterling no longer the prisoner. The air was humid, for the day had been warm, and while somewhat close, was many thoughts away for Josephine. "If we're going to burn my brother's reputation and feed the Abwehr a feast of lies," Josephine said, lighting a cigarette and handing it to Sterling, "they have to be lies born of fact. For the Germans will always look to verify. Doesn't have to be much, as long as they are satisfied that some are born of truth." That sound like the truth. After a long, upper-class speech which basically said back to Josephine what she had just said to him, she began to write SS. He talked. Lie 1, she didn't write the coordinates of a fuel dump, vast in size, hidden, Katara Depression, scheduled for pickup by a SAS Force Z. She looked across to Sterling for direction. "What?" he asked. "Oh, you want the verification? Well," he dragged on the cigarette before handing it back to her, "the Abwehr should check aerial reconnaissance of a specific dry wadi. We abandoned a dozen broken-down trucks there months ago." "Yes," agreed Josephine, "I have seen the photographs." Sterling pointed to the ledger. "There, then, put that down." He watched as she wrote. 10,000 feet, under camouflage netting, they look like a fully fueled strike force, he dictated. "So panzer units can be diverted away from the actual Allied advance on the hunt for SAS vehicles that don't exist." Josephine looked up, ashamed in herself that she was impressed by the man's mischief. "You're good at this," Josephine murmured, her eyes tracking his hand as he took the pencil and sketched a line map in the ledger. He was indeed good at art, Josephine conceded. Perhaps he would have been better off sticking to Southampton and the Ordnance Survey mapping, outstripping the drawing with the lies themselves. How Josephine wished she had known which information he had fabricated in the past, rather than find out with abstract shouting and violence from Brother William when his broadcast was shown to be a falsehood. "Not as good as you, Joyce," he told her, his eyes crinkling in disbelief as they contrasted with what sounded like praise coming from his mouth. "But, if you choose to repeat the lie that you were betrayed in Musi with a Captain Druce, then I'm not about to argue with you. We have a deadline." Josephine felt anger rise in chest. She leaned in, her shoulder brushing his. "Henry didn't have your ice, Sterling. He had a heart." And she paused to mourn Henry Druce's almost inevitable passing. "Okay, so on to the second lie," Sterling continued, ignoring her comment. "Just put General Mess communications with British, low-frequency radio, Sicily." He looked at her efficient hand, noting his words. "Time, 11:30 GMT. Frequency 258. "Is that a genuine broadcast?" Josephine asked, doubtfully. "It's the Royal Navy recalibrating its radio frequency using the shipping forecast via Morse. The Abwehr will get secret names repeated with different command words, in Morse. By the time they've translated it, you will have been told by me that the radio transmissions were compromised and the signal now received is to retune the fleet's signal." Despite herself, Josephine smiled. That was indeed mischief by the cheats and the stinkers. "William may even broadcast the signal," Josephine replied, noting the coordinates of the supposed signal ships in the Mediterranean. "Let him," Sterling murmured, thoughtfully. "The louder he screams it, the more the Abwehr will believe they've struck gold. They won't realize they're digging their own grave until the firing squads start hitting their own men." Josephine looked at him, her gaze lingering, despite himself. "You're a callous bastard, Sterling. Number. It is me of the two of us who can verify their parentage. I can see why my brother followed you." A broken bar. Sterling looked at Josephine, thoughtfully. "Ah, yes, Paddy Main." "Only a broken bar? What do you call him a broken bar? Robbie a broken bar, a better broken bar. Robert," Sterling repeated, dryly, believing not one word. He put his hand on the table where he had placed Paddy's letter. Josephine made a grab for it, but he caught her wrist, then slapped her hand away. "Right?" he demanded, pointing to the ledger. "We haven't got long before we have to do this." "You're going in the morning?" Josephine nodded. "Put A British intelligence have developed a new magnetic sea mine that is unstable and can be detonated by a specific sonar pulse. Write down these, he added, pulling a piece of paper from his pocket. You designed false technical specs in your spare time? Oh, I have lots of spare time, and I'm bored. Josephine Joyce. It's O'Neill. Josephine O'Neill. He stared at her for a moment, then took up the pencil. Don't tell me, you have a third brother, Domhnall O'Neill, do you know? He laughed. I went to school with a Domhnall O'Neill. Josephine snatched the pencil back and made a copy of the fictitious engineering plan of the sea mine. Sterling watched, with amusement. When the Germans test these specs against captured British mines, which some of your compatriots, he added, with no conviction, sabotaged prior to capture, the mines will fail exactly as predicted. So the German U-boats will ignore certain safe shipping lanes, thinking they can easily disable the mines, leading them directly into a concentrated Allied depth charge trap. And, Sterling stopped talking when he noticed Josephine had stopped writing. Moosey still hurts, doesn't it? Sterling asked suddenly, the silence of the room amplifying the question. Josephine tore her eyes away from the letters in the ledger, which was steadying her mind, her emotions. Her tears began to appear in her eyes nonetheless, and she turned to look at the door. Every night I see the silk of the parachutes and the fire in the barns. Eve Mansour sat in Cairo and watched us die for a profit. She looked back to Sterling. If this works, if we break the Ablaze trust in the radio game Issa Broken Bar. Sterling did not clap, or mock her for her acting skills as he felt like doing. Somehow, regardless whether these tears represented real events, he was moved. And Josephine was hurt that Eve was still alive, for she knew she was a traitor. And it wounded her up more that Sterling was delighted with her being alive and did not for 1 second believe she was a traitor. Nor believe anything Josephine had to say, either. Stalemate. Of course she would be the same in his position. But it was agonizing, nonetheless. Now Thesa Broken Bar, this one is good, and right up your street. Josephine watched him in his delight. He glanced at her, deliciously. Bill Sterling confirms a secret SAS training camp in Northern Ireland, hidden within a civilian shipyard, supposedly protected by loyalist dock workers. He looked at the ledger. Josephine found her mouth fall open. When she failed to note anything, Sterling inspected her face. Put, A. Josephine Joyce. Republican contacts verify increased troop movements and unusual crates arriving at the Belfast docks. He glanced at the ledger again, then spoke more animatedly. These are actually empty crates that Sterling Sr. arranged via a coded letter to his family's estates. Sterling glanced between her and the ledger. The goal, he pressed, force the Luftwaffe to waste precious long-range bombers attacking empty Belfast warehouses, pulling air cover away from the English char. Sterling broke off, and looked at her. Why are you not writing everything down? He made to take her hand, to guide it, but she shook it away. Instead of reacting, Josephine simply picked up the ledger, tucked in her chair and paced to the door. Josephine. Sterling called, striking his own chair back. Josephine Joyce. She turned on her heel, hot tears on her cheeks. O'Neill. She shot back. Josephine O'Neill. Mrs. She wrenched the door open before he could stop her, slamming the doors, throwing up the drawbridge of her heart, a thick, dense bramble around the turret of her soul entwined with Michael's. She paused, pushed her emotion away, and shouted through, I'll get these to William. Then banged the hatch closed, breaking into a run to her own quarters, only just remembering in time to wedge the chair under the door handle. Secure in an uncompromisable castle, though the officers were making this a fiction on a weekly, if not daily basis, only then did Josephine O'Neill succumb to her emotion, and bury her head into her pillow. 88,888,888. Too early not to be night. Sterling was woken by the door of the solitary cell being scraped open. Not the crisp voice of Ethan, or whoever she was, bent with a soft dialect when she was animated, but the deep-rounded notes of a drunken Irishman. O'Reilly held the door closed, a cosh in his hand. Do you want out of here, Scotchman? he asked. And David Sterling did, so very much. The woman Joyce keeps promising, but, he glanced around the cloying walls, it's come to nothing. And meet a Kaylin who your heart desires? Now, that sounds like a poem, Sterling began to say. But the soft dark features of her face appeared in his mind, one he believed he would never again meet. Despite the letter a broken bar, but to see here a broken bar, to hold here a broken bar, to feel her in his arms again a broken bar. Yes, breathed Sterling, his heart beating his head. I would very much like that. O'Reilly strode to him, letting the baton under which Sterling had suffered so many times fall loose in his hand. Then, agree. Tell the world what you know. Then you may have a broken bar, Italian sun and good food and your woman. 88,888,888. The shadows of Berlin were longer and colder than the ones in Colditz. Josephine stood in the gilded office in the heart of the Reich, facing the man who shed her blood. Charlottenburg's quiet, well-to-do life continued beneath Rundfunkhause's windows. William Joyce didn't look at Josephine directly. Instead, he turned to the mirror and adjusted his tie. The food does not agree, in Saxon. She turned from the window, as a couple of Mercedes inched along it. People would be here soon. Her brother's broadcasts were performed in front of a live audience. Josephine expected more, considering who was meant to be coming. Meant, for once outside Colditz, who knew what Major Sterling would do? Do you eat well here? Around Goebbels' table? William turned, his officious look shifting to hardness at her jibe. You're here because the Irish Republican cause needs authenticity. I read what you wrote. He looked at the notes in his hand. I secured you a position at Colditz because of the richness that Castle has, a load of secrets. And so far you have unearthed little. Until today. Until he walks through the door downstairs. Until he sits opposite my brother on stage. I will never believe that the founder of the SAS will read out propaganda for the Nazis, nor put his name to it, Josephine thought. She had sat in that office before, 6 months ago, as Reinhold Eggers and John O'Reilly flanked the desk, and William spoke as if he'd arranged it all, and that Josephine had not approached Stelnberg herself. There's a man there, Sterling, an aristocrat with a mouth far bigger than his brain. Break him, feed him, and bring me what he knows. Her brain drifted to that morning, where she had scrubbed her face to eradicate any evidence that she had cried, did her hair and retrieved the clean, now dry uniform from the laundry. The air was close and heavy still in the solitary cell, the silence as she stood there as dense as smog. She placed the ledger down on the table and took a seat beside it, crossing the floor past where O'Reilly had stood, being the one to have broken Sterling. Would it have made a difference? She could not break the cogs, nor be a chink of grit in them now that would stop the mill, nor even do it substantial damage. Josephine didn't know then that it had been O'Reilly who had given Sterling his route to freedom, and that what was to transpire in Berlin that evening would be inconsequential. Can you make these sound convincing? To my brother? Sterling, recumbent on the camp bed, got to his feet and ambled slowly towards her. He looked down at the ledger, noting that Life 4 was not there, and laughed at her silently. He was about to quip that Paddy Mayne, as far as he knew, was not in Berlin, but the promise he had been made that morning made him preserve the memory of his friend. He would be gone and the Joyce woman would be here, scrabbling around for meager secrets. He'll believe this, David told her, his head dipping close to her ear. Josephine caught the whiff of tobacco and the cold damp of the stone. It's just the right amount of British incompetence. It'll make your brother feel like the smartest man in Berlin. He is a fool, Josephine said, then looked at the page. She would transcribe it and be taken to the broadcasting house. Did O'Reilly tell you I am going to be giving the interview? Yes, though she couldn't believe her ears when her countryman told her. So I will see you in Berlin. She got up. You won't have garroted the driver or punched through the window or ran towards Poland in the meantime? Sterling sneered at her. On my honor as a gentleman. Be bowed, mockingly. Ha! Josephine exclaimed. Then, perhaps we can have a little late-night drink here, back in my fabulous abode, with... He bent down and gestured to the floor. My sophisticated house guests, they don't gnaw and scuttle much. With the French wine from the ice storm a broken bar. Sterling stood in her way as she made to the door. I'd never know, considering the promises you've made have come to nothing. He watched her profile, the sharp, mousy nose, the severe line of her jaw. The upper-class mask he wore was slipping. He pulled it back up. He had mixed feelings about the dorms, too many communists and levelers there, no hierarchy. I should beat you for this, Miss Joyce, he told her. I've beaten men for less. All of this is a lie. He reached out, his hand reaching for Josephine's empty one. It wasn't a gentle gesture, rather a claim, a demand for recognition. His hand was warm compared to hers and she could feel the life in him. You're too arrogant to be worth a lie, she snapped, pulling her hand away. Her eyes flickered to his, sparking with a fierce defiance. If you die, I have to explain to Bill Sterling why I failed. And that means a lot to you. Thee's a broken bar, rock a broken bar. That a broken bar fabrication? He tutted like she a bad child and he the nanny. You have never met my brother. You have never been to Perthshire, where my country home lies. You have never been on a recce with the so in a remote part of France that was betrayed. And your brother is not, Paddy a broken bar main. You, he declared, are an upstart bitch with 1,000 faces to please 1,000 men and not once, have you come close to uncovering any secrets I may possess. Just a broken Barbie there, Josephine told him. And, one day, you may wish to know how it is I know that there is a panel in the wood at the left of the passageway by the door of your old bedroom that had to be replaced with Javanese teak rather than Burmese. She had seen it every morning, every proto morning, as her eyes had barely opened but her legs were scrambling into corduroy trousers and braces and cotton shirts. There, she'd said it. The golden memory apparently in her mind which, should she explore it, be the memories of the summer days 2 years before when Bill Sterling had taken her to Ear House and she had lived as tidy upper classes did while she honed her skills as a field operative. Sterling grabbed for her again, and tightened his grasp at her insouciance. To mention his brother a broken bar, his house a broken bar. A broken bar. There was a panel just like that, in the passageway by his childhood bedroom. A broken bar. Is that all I am? A delivery for Bill to say he got his brother out of yet another jape? What was your end of the bargain? Josephine narrowed her eyes. I liked your brother. I don't like you. Then why? David murmured. Are you still holding my hand? Josephine pulled back sharply. The spell breaking as the heavy boots of a guard echoed in the corridor outside. She gripped the ledger and fumbled for the key. The broadcast is at 9. The car will come at 5, she said, her voice once again a cold monotone. Don't be late for your own escape, Major, for we know that's what you'll try. Escape, Sterling mused, as the door closed and her footsteps echoed away. I'll be right here and tell those lies and be in Italy in the morning. 88,888,888. But someone higher up also thought that Sterling traveling to Berlin was too much of a risk. While Josephine stood with her brother waiting the broadcast, John Francis O'Reilly commandeered radio equipment and, with the help of 2 officers, rigged up a transmission from the solitary cell. Damn and blast the Hun! Cursed Neve, as the lights from inside the older tunnel went out. From Reed's estimate they were past the security gatehouse and close to the periphery of the rock face. Those in his escape party, him, Onions, 2 French and a Pole had been practicing upper body strength exercises for a climb down the sheer rock face. They ought to be by the natural spring channel by now. But now, they were plunged into blackness. In the studio, where Joyce would broadcast the propaganda for the evening, men and women assembled in evening dress and furs, jewels and top hats. Red, swastika-encrusted banners hung down the walls as they did everywhere and men in military uniform dotted the seats, to guard, or to listen. She looked on from the transmission box, wondering where Sterling was. He'd escaped, of course. He wouldn't be coming. Josephine wondered if she had time, even now, to make a dash for William's apartment and turn it over in a perceived robbery and get to a port and get out of Germany. Even St. Petersburg looked attractive just then. Just the broken bar. There's been a change of plan. Her brother moved to one side of her, cognac on his breath. He was always high on something before a speech. Overhead, the familiar buzz of bombers. But Josephine did not risk paying enough attention to William Joyce. In his state, he had been at his most violent. Pat O'Brien is overseeing the broadcast tonight, and it is coming from off Flag 4C. Of course they hadn't moved him. Of course they knew Major Sterling was a risk. But, how clever to involve O'Reilly and do it from Colditz. That presented more risk to her, thought Josephine, and she wondered how long she would have stay in Berlin form. Her stomach dropped when she saw someone near the front of the audience who she recognized. William Joyce was watching her look at him. Come, Josephine, you will be in the audience. And yes, Oswald is very keen to reacquaint himself with you. Isn't that Diana beside him? Josephine pointed out. The third Mitford sister, the svelte aristocratic beauty. Yes, agreed Joyce, and after, she will have gone back to their flat, and Oswald will be joining us at my own. And I will be getting myself out of this mess, thought Josephine. But now wasn't the time, nor was it the place. She sat where her brother gestured, on the same row as Mosley, who leaned forward and gave her an amphibianic smile. Good evening. Joyce departed from her with and, himself in a dinner jacket, strode up the steps onto the stage. Beside him, the orchestra played the German national anthem, and all stood, many raising their right arm. They could kill her before she did that, Josephine thought, and made sure she was fumbling with her bag and the ledger at the crucial moment, clumsiness masking defiance. Then, Joyce began, standing at the microphone, its transmission slightly overmodulated, causing a slight feedback loop. In the officers' dormitory, the broadcast began. Yeah, bloody yeah, declared Pat Reed, throwing a balled-up pair of socks into the air. New women's knickers, one yank and they're down. The soft, bubbling laughter rippled to silence as the officers listened under duress. Germany calling a broken bar. Germany calling a broken bar. This is William Joyce, speaking from Berlin, still standing, still broadcasting, and tonight, for the first time, broadcasting live from off Flag 4C. Shouts of disbelief and a roar of noise arose, as Bader, Sinclair and Reed hushed them to silence. And it is a voice of whom many of you will recognize. Tonight, a frank and confident account of the war, told plainly by a captive British major, dear listeners, in Deutschland and over the North Sea. Outrage, outrageous declamations at the words, British major, and accompanied their decries and protestations by banging their iron bed frames with mess tins and boots. Reed raised a hand as the click in the broadcast brought forth a hiss of a hush. The lights flickered. Good job that it wasn't 2 nights before, when he tried to swap places with Ponat, or the week before when Peter Allen was carried out in the mattress, his place ghosted by Jack Best. Listeners, accustomed to understatement, may finally grasp the scale of German success, by listening to the Major, and understand that a welcome in the mall is necessary for the soon transfer of power in London to the richer broken bar. In Berlin, Josephine felt her stomach fall even further. It was quite obviously Sterling speaking, his clipped, rounded tones speaking the words of treachery. Clearly from the solitary cell, clearly involving O'Reilly as Pat O'Brien. You will have heard exaggerated reports concerning the Eastern Front. It is true that German forces have withdrawn from certain cities whose names were recently emphasized on maps, newspapers, and commemorative medals. Sterling spoke, looking at the briefing letter that had been placed in front of him was illuminated by an electric light rigged to the electric socket. He looked across the page, and then leaned back on the chair, holding the RCA microphone and putting his feet on the table. At Stalingrad, for example, the German army demonstrated unsurpassed endurance by holding out heroically until it had run out of ammunition, food, fuel, winter clothing, and options. The fact that an entire army no longer answers roll call should not trouble you. Germany has many armies. Fewer than it used to, perhaps. But, what matters is confidence. In Berlin, the atmosphere was intense. Most were non-English speakers, and felt they were listening to the usual propaganda broadcast. In Oflag 4C, the penny dropped much sooner. Below, Sterling could hear the men as his own voice carried along the prison from the loudspeaker. The Russian winter, which once again arrived without warning, has been unfairly blamed for events which were clearly the result of enemy stubbornness. Sterling grinned, guessing the effect. So we hope for more of that result in the near future. In Italy, our loyal ally continues to contribute magnificently by discovering new ways to change sides without actually doing so. A small ripple of laughter began, and dropped away quickly in the theater. Josephine risked to look round. Mosley was looking across to her brother, whose face was fixed, as if a wax doll. In North Africa, continued Sterling, watching O'Reilly get out his kosh, and edged closer to the radio equipment, to dive behind it when the blows came. Field Marshal Rommel has conducted one of the most educational campaigns in military history, proving conclusively that fuel is helpful, supply lines are important, and deserts are quite large. Elation, as the laughter began below him. The officers, who he knew would have been outraged that a British officer had turned to the enemy, now realized that Lord Haw had been entirely duped. Axis forces are now positioned in Tunisia, which places them conveniently close to Europe, should they ever need to return quickly. This, listeners, is what we call elastic strategy. It stretches, and inevitably snaps. "No," protested Josephine, silently. "No." She watched as William turned his head, slowly, keeping a stiff demeanor. A guard crossed the stage and bent beside William Joyce's ear. He stopped, glanced to the audience, and turned back, whispering something in return. Then, he glared in Josephine's direction. In the officers' dorms, there was uproarious laughter, at the voice, unmistakable as David Sterling's, continued. Enemy bombers continue to appear over German cities in ever-increasing numbers. This is, of course, a sign of desperation. It takes no skill to fly thousands of aircraft night after night, hit factories, railways, power stations, oil facilities, and then return safely to bases that are not being bombed in return.